staging.
Yeah.
Has she passed out during the show yet?
Not yet, but
There's always Saturday.
She's passed out a couple times backstage.
I've done that before. Passing out on stage. Well,
I also hope that
All right, we'll just
LEDs and
have to hope that works.
I was not going to be. Why are these Gemmas wearing laser tags?
That's a real thing. That's a real thing.
I don't know. I had to go get Cheez-Its because at one point I was like, I don't know if I'm hangry or I was like, I had to stay in the catwalk and stay on the rail for like hours in my room. And so I went inside and I'm like, let me take a picture of this.
Did anybody see Must Go On when it was here?
It was
Every person, did you say that to? See it had that exact reaction.
I ushered the night that I saw it. It was terrible. It was embarrassing. It was written by one of our faculty.
I know.
It was a little bit out of touch.
I know.
John Peter Ames. I think that was another instance of he had a vision that like
Because if they had shot it on, I don't know. Actually.
the fact that it was happening live in the other room just was like asking for what happened.
You know, well, you could have dressed.
Did you see it?
I mean,
The stage, like the actual area looked good.
It's just
The stage decoration was nice. There's some stuff that might have worked conceptually,
yeah, it was
but
like
didn't necessarily work well. Like the back and forth, specifically the back and forth lines where somebody's supposed to say something on the screen which reflects, and it's supposed to be punchy. Like the guy that brings West Wing, whatever his name is.
that wasn't just, it wasn't just a transition of being like, all of these things have like a different
Yes.
yeah, it was just
There's a lot of weirdness going on.
I think under construction kind of made up for that. I was really impressed with that.
See, I didn't get to see under construction. I had to take a break because I was so. I was just like, holy shit! I saw Fantastic and thought like awesome, and then it's like okay, let's hit it up again. Unfortunately, it's just so burnt by it. Let's go on. And I was like, which is funny because I know some of the actors in there and they're like good actors.
Okay, you guys ready?
Yes.
All right, so Othello. I left you with last class to think about the whole black-white symbolism throughout the play. And what are some of the instances that you found that you can think of off the top of your head? And when I say black-white, I'm not necessarily talking about skin color or race. In fact, that's just a small part of it.
Olivia wears black. Wait.
Oh no, we're on Othello, not Othello.
No, I think I said the wrong name.
Desdemona?
Or any other.
I said the wrong name. What's her name?
What about, what scenes can you think of that have fire, like torches, lanterns? There's a few actually, there's several. It's kind of a reoccurring motif throughout the play. What's that? Oh, your book is out there?
My book is out there. Yeah, sorry, I'm not going to go get it.
I understand. All right, we'll start with the first act with lanterns or torches or lights to use that. I think they use some archaic word to describe it.
Is there a light in the house?
Well, the house is dark when Iago and Othello show
But
up.
when they come out,
I did not with Iago.
yeah, Iago.
When they're talking to the dad, he says, what is the word he uses for Karak? Is that it? I've never heard it referred to. It must be an old Elizabethan term for it, but oh wait, that's not it. Okay, well anyway, there's that. The father also, when he organizes the search party, also when they approach Othello, they're burning torches. Probably the most famous scene in the play involves a light or a lantern of some sort. What do you think of it? What's that?
When he goes into do away with does it, it is the cause, it's the cause in the house. All the mentions of not only fire, but also how white her skin is.
What passage is that? Let's go to that.
Page 650, just the very first monologue in 5-2.
That's right. And there's a line in there that says, I put out.
There's that section in the middle before he says that. That was the line that I was looking for, because it was when you're talking about the candle, her life, what's her name, her life to
I put out, it's line 7, Act 5-2. Why don't we just read the whole passage? Anybody want to volunteer? The first, I guess I'll do it. All right. Othello enters Desdemona's bedchamber with a light. It's dark, she's sleeping. And he begins to talk. It is the cause, my soul. Let me not name it to you, you chaste stars. It is the cause. Yet I'll not shed her blood, or scar that whiter skin of hers than snow, and smooth as monumental alabaster. Think of all the different words for white. Comparing your skin to snow, alabaster. So in the he's on the one hand, on the surface, talking about her outward appearance, whiter skin, but you could also read the symbolic meaning into it. And then here's the line I was talking about. Put out the light, and then put out the light. So 2 meanings for light, what are those 2 meanings? The literal light, and then the light of her life, yeah.
Or it could be reversed.
One or the other, yeah.
We have the light instead of the light of life, and then testing everything.
Exactly. Extinguishing her life. If I quench thee, thou flaming minister, I can again thy former light restore. Should I repent me, but once put out thy light, thou cunningest pattern of excelling nature, I know not where is that Armenian heat that can thy light renew. So you can rekindle a physical lantern, but once you take the life, then you cannot rekindle that. And then again, more images. What's that?
He's not saying you can't, he's saying he doesn't know how to do it.
Oh, to return life to her?
Yeah, because he's referring to the tale of Prometheus, in that fire was brought down, so he thinks it's working. He's indicating that it would be possible that he has no idea how to do it, and it's a power that's beyond him.
Should I repent thee, but once put out thy light, thou cunningest pattern of excelling nature, I know not where is that Armenian heat that can thy light renew. Yeah, so I guess he does not know where the
places the whole uncertainty. He's not certain that it's impossible to win, that it's impossible to bring her back. But it's playing on the whole. He's uncertain of her fidelity. He's uncertain of a lot of things at this point. One of those, and that would be playing.
Well, he's coming to grips with this big decision he's about to make. That once he does it, he can't turn back. So as he continues, when I have plucked thy rose, I cannot give it a final growth again. So he's acknowledging that, once he does it, it can't be undone.
That's a weird metaphor for murder. That sounds like taking her virginity. That doesn't sound like a murder.
Yeah.
Is taking the virginity not a murder of innocence?
Yeah.
And
Fair enough.
I think you just have a dirty mind.
Flowers, chastity. This is like
You point with flowers.
classic virginity imagery.
Well, I think it's kind of the flower metaphor goes back to the how we kill children. I want to touch rose.
Yeah.
Based on like when you cut
Right.
rose, it's still
But yeah, but he's
Yeah.
talking about murder, so
So
they've already
ties
done
back
sex.
to I'm gonna kill you. I'm just not gonna cut you up into tiny pieces. You like
Liz with me.
Yeah. And he kills her in such a way that doesn't mar her beauty.
yeah. Other
Like
than
he could have slashed or stabbed her, covered her in blood. He just how
Yeah,
does
like
he
he
do
didn't
it?
even strangle her because like that would leave bruises. He smothered her.
He smothered her. All right. Well, anyway, there's one of the lights, fire, lamp, lantern imagery, darkness, lightness. What's another one? Right before this, directly before this act, involves someone getting killed. Iago and the whole scene, Rodrigo has been set up to kill Cassio. And remember the two people, I forget their minor characters, Lodovicio or Lodovicio. They come upon the screaming, someone screaming for his life, and it's dark, and he says they don't want to go in because it's dangerous, In darkness, they might get killed themselves. But it's also an opportunity. Somebody uses the darkness to who doesn't. Iago, under the cloak of darkness, goes in and finishes off Rodrigo and slashes Cassidy, trying to further wound him as well. So,
I like how when Iago comes in, I don't know, what's his name? Graziano, possibly. He says,
what page are you on?
on 648, line 48. He says, everyone comes in his shirt with light and what the light, and he says light before weapons.
Yeah, I never picked up on that. And this whole play is just full of this theme.
And also, because they're in the darkness. The people in this scene, some people are afraid of the light and some want it. Because Cassio earlier on, 31-ish, says, "Oh help, oh light, a surgeon." So, I don't know. I mean, it's weird that in the same scene, you have two strongly opposing attitudes towards light.
Well, it seems that in both scenes, when Desdemona gets killed, the darkness there is associated with death. Light is life, darkness, death. Here, darkness is where evil can happen, where people like Iago are used as an opportunity to commit evil. People are rightly scared of those guys that didn't want to go into it. So you've got this whole black, white, good, bad dichotomy. Symbolism has been around forever. And one thing, there's also the race angle, which a lot of people have talked a lot about how Othello, one of the main themes is supposedly the race issue. How big of a theme do you think that is?
Well, this is the thing that I've been curious about. It's kind of a high school question, in as much as I'm sure this was explained to me and I just forgotten it since high school. But I wondered what the perception at the time of race was, because you obviously have him. You have him referred to, or you have the author referred to Othello as Moorish, or I can't remember what there's something very specific, but it escaped me at the moment. I just didn't know what the.
Well, yeah, there's Barbary. They use all sorts of words too. We'll talk about that in a second. One thing is, well, all right, to answer your question, a Moor, even today, Morocco, that's what they.
Okay, fair.
The people of northern Africa, the Berbers, the Muslims, they're more of an Arab type people. The Barbary, that would be the Libyans, the Barbary coast. They refer to Othello as a Barbary horse, I think somewhere in the first act. So there's all these different, what other hints of his ethnic or racial or religious background can you find? Or maybe I should ask, what do you think Othello looks like, or what is his background? Or what did Shakespeare intend his background?
I was thinking that it was more, we talk about the Sultan Empire, so that would be more, well, I was thinking dark, physical, like he was so much bigger than everyone, that he like literally overshadowed them. But I was thinking dark, not like the African continent, but more of the Turkish, the Ottoman Empire, they're a little rounder. But isn't that more historical? Isn't the Sultans?
Well, yeah.
The Arab Sultan extending about that as far as
Throughout the play, he's referred to, and Othello even refers to himself as black. But you can't read that word in the modern sense, because in Elizabethan times that was just anybody who had a darker complexion. Now the book, if you've read, I'm sure most of you've read the introduction here, and they say here, and I take issue with this, and I think Dr. Boulding and others would, they come right out and say, Othello is unquestionably a black man, referred to disparagingly by his detractors as the thick lips of his sooty bosom. But as I pointed out, Moor, Barbary, all of these things would suggest somebody from the Muslim Mediterranean area. And the Ottoman Empire, as we talked about in the last play, was big, and Western Europeans found it both threatening but fascinating at the same time as he was coming up.
I mean, it doesn't have to be so concrete, like we decide exactly what he looks like. I believe that the English didn't really know that much about the Ottoman Empire and Africa and all of that. It was all just kind of other, and yeah, they had travel books that they could read. A lot of those were super exaggerated. Some of them were just downright made up. Yeah. So who really knew what was real and what wasn't real? So it's probably just some kind of like a vague impression of.
Well, no, they knew about it. They knew about these people, and around the time, right before this play was written, there was the king of Morocco, or the Sultan of Morocco, actually came to London, and it was a big to-do, and everybody were impressed by their elaborate outfits. So that could have been an inspiration somewhere.
I'm just wondering, and I don't know if there's even an answer to this, but like, how would Othello been like staged? Because I doubt they would have had like a black actor or like black white actor, would they? I mean, I don't know.
Well, that's.
I honestly have no idea. And if they didn't, would they have had just like a white eye, a black face? And if so, like, how black would it have been? And
In recent times, and that's really politically incorrect to do that now, but up until, I don't know, the 50s or so,
Right.
At least in this country, where the race issue is a bit different. They have traditionally portrayed him as black. It would be white actors in blackface.
And then would it, I mean,
But-
would it be like blackface, like do you think of blackface being like,
I don't know, put some sort of makeup on, but I'm guessing, I don't know how they did it in Shakespeare's time, but I'm sure the costumes that he wore, I don't really know. But the thing is, Shakespeare is never really specific about his race, and he leaves it ambiguous. I don't know if it's intentional or not, or if he's just kind of a composite of all of it. He basically just represents the other, kind of like Caliban. In modern times in this country, because we tend to focus more on the racial angle of this play, and we also, if you've seen the Lawrence Fishburne movie of Othello, and even on stage, they often show him as a black man. But we're just bringing our own contemporary historical baggage into it, possibly. Also, with the whole Iago being gay as well. That's probably more modern, bringing our own modern politics into it.
Right. I mean, that's why it's, it's why I'm always interested to sort of get a better picture of the racial thing. But I guess what you're saying is that black was kind of just preferred to anybody that was outside of like an Anglo background, I guess. Okay. So far more equivalently, I guess.
But that's interesting since if there were other race issues, it's like we can remain really politically correct by making Othello black on the stage. But if they had, I mean, I've never seen a production where they put anyone, like an Arab on stage and not wrong.
Well, that's an interesting thing, being politically correct. I mean, you could make a pretty good argument that it's insulting to black people to portray Othello as a black person. Because as we ended our discussion yesterday, we were talking about what his flaw was. And, he was an otherwise intelligent, strong, capable guy, but his jealousy and his passions got the best of him, and he killed his wife. And so the implication, at least you could read it, is that his flaw was that because he's not a Western person, he was not in control of his emotions. And so by portraying Othello as a black person, it's kind of reinforcing that, false, ugly stereotype. So I don't know, what do you think of that? Go ahead.
There's also that Othello seems to kind of let comments on race get to him. Like he's almost at times Iago will mention things, and he kind of starts to believe that he's not worthy or doesn't honor, but doesn't want to cheat on him because of his race. So he almost kind of like gives in to these.
Oh yeah, Iago. There's that instance. What passage is that? Let's go to.
Sorry, I'm
3:3. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. Most of the interactions, the significance between Iago and Othello seem to be that instance.
So we were talking on Wednesday about how Iago is really good at finding people's weak spots and manipulating them into doing that. So in a sense, let's read it. It's 3:3. Just talking about how I know how much you know where they are and you if I can't find it soon, but you know the scene I'm talking about. But anyway, yeah, Iago's basically playing upon Othello's inferiority complex of being a foreign person in Venice and being not one of them. And so that's how he's able to manipulate. He also does it in the beginning with Desdemona. his father by race baiting, using animalistic language to describe Othello and Desdemona, and the whole race mixing thing is likening it to bestiality. So that's kind of inflammatory language for sure. But despite these race instances, I'm not really sure that race is really the major theme of this. However, modern productions might want to make it that way. What would you say is the major theme of the play? Don't slander your wife?
He was the one slandering her. Don't kill people with pillows. Applicable to all situations.
That's probably preferable in other ways.
Vacation.
Burning.
Like,
Other Shakespearean texts.
Burning just sounds less
I mean,
good
it's
than being served.
Although, like, people who are burned at the stake usually suffocated before they physically burned to death.
This is a great class.
I'm just saying it's not fun. You shouldn't do it. That's my takeaway from this club.
I would say,
Unless you're into that.
Or just like we said yesterday, how this play probably should have been entitled Iago. Because it's really all about him. I kind of feel like it deals a lot with trust. Because when we wrote this in high school, my friends and I said we were going to make a drinking game. Anytime someone calls Iago honest, you like
Oh,
take a
yeah.
drink. But we should say so but it was like we did not drink in high school. We did not drink in high school. So but it's just because he puts all of his trust in Iago. So I mean, and then again the theme of letting passions, I guess, take control of you. That sort of seems to be a flaw of a lot of Shakespearean tragic figures. Is they just become so overwhelmed by their emotions and they don't really think things through anymore.
yeah.
Okay, with the whole entire drink every time someone says Iago's honest, I can see how that'd be a good drink. With this play, yeah.
Yeah, he's called that several times. It kind of reminds me of the Odyssey, the brave master. Clever Odysseus. They always have that nickname. Anyway, off on a tangent. I would say the main theme to me, I don't know if this is debatable, would just be jealousy or sexual jealousy. I don't know what you think.
It's applicable. I mean, I think that anybody that bar a few people, I think that most have kind of had an experience with lust and attraction, and then knowing that they could probably do something pretty heinous to position themselves, or they would proceed to position themselves in a better place. So I think in that way, I don't think Iago's like extraordinary in his feelings.
Yeah.
I think he might be extraordinary in his actions. I don't know how often that kind of thing happens, though it does happen. But I think that's pretty solidly there. I think it's more about that than about race from my reading of it, if only because race is brought up, but it seems to be used as a kind of tool. If you're asking why race is brought up, if you're going to keep digging down, I kind of feel like you reach the point where it's like, well, Iago's, had this is like this extreme lust and sexual jealousy.
Yeah.
Now where it's pointed, we've added the modern thing of like, oh well, maybe he's gay or whatever. Okay, but I certainly think it's there.
Yeah.
It might be the extra meta stuff that we add on to it might be a little bit. I don't know, people.
This is sort of adding on to modern interpretation, but I didn't think about this until someone said my jealousy. I think it's really interesting the fact that Othello sort of puts it upon himself to become her judge for committing adultery. And yet, earlier in the play, there were all these rumors of Othello sleeping with Iago's wife, which, even though we don't really get any hint as to whether or not that's true, I think it would be interesting if it were true that that sin
could be forgiven, or no one felt the need